Alibhai-Brown to my left, on the far left actually, author and political commentator. Next to her, also on my left, is Susan Hall, Conservative London Assembly member, also a potential candidate for next year's London mayoral election. On my right is Siân Berry, the Green Party London Assembly member and former party leader. And on the far right, no, not necessarily politically, is Lucy Fisher, Whitehall editor of the Financial Times. You might want to ask the panellists about what we've been discussing in the last hour. Police seemingly cracking down on Just Stop Oil activists in a more forceful manner. More than half of train services across the country being cancelled again today, with drivers in the ASLEF union out on strike. Ministers increasing the financial support for childcare for families who get universal credit. AI experts warning that tech they've dedicated their life's work to could end up wiping out the human race. Plus, you're welcome to ask them about anything else which is on your mind this evening. And don't forget, you can watch Cross Question live on Global Player. So call 0345 6060 973 or text 84850.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch on Global Player. This is LBC.
So let's go to Brian, first-time caller. Very warm welcome, Brian, in Newmarket. What's your question?
Hello. Well, I just read reports that an RAF recruitment email talked of, quote, useless white male pilots, end quote, hoping to recruit more people of colour and women. The UK and the USA are destroying themselves by woke madness, which seems to be growing daily. Would the panel agree?
Well, this is Sky News has obtained a leak email which highlighted useless white male pilots. It's an interesting question, Brian. Thanks for raising it. Yasmin Alibhai-Brown.
Well, I don't know why you should be alarmed by it at all. For generations, both here and in the United States, certain occupations have been more or less wholly white. If change is coming, that's hardly woke. That's just fair, right, and of course they should be good enough, but it's incredibly kind of interesting to me that every time these changes are announced, people stick on the label of woke as if that immediately turns it into a madness. It's not. It's how the world should be and is becoming. And on this show, for the first time ever since I've been on, there are 4 women and a very able white presenter. Is that the end of the world? No. Is that woke madness? No.
I thought I was Asian. I've now just been turned white.
No, I didn't say. Did I say white?
Yes, you did.
I didn't mean white. I didn't mean white. Sorry.
I know I'm quite fair, Yasmin. I'll take it as a compliment.
I'm very sorry.
But Yasmin, just one thing, because we had, I think it was the head of recruitment, wasn't it, at the RAF, if I remember correctly now, who resigned on the back of this policy of recruiting people from ethnic minorities. And ultimately, should it not be the best person for the job? And I mean, ultimately, you want people who can fly the planes, can't you?
So you can tell me, hand on heart, that every white person who's been appointed by the RAF has been superbly qualified, all of them, and that all the others are not qualified? I mean, there are failures in appointments. Every single institution appoints, and people are good or people are bad. But what has happened has been kind of almost unconscious replication of the people who are already there. That has to change.
Susan Hall, fair point, isn't it?
No, why bring the colour of their skin into it? I think this is absolutely appalling. How dare they be rude to any amount of people? How dare they be rude to anybody? It's totally unacceptable to call anybody that. I think I could not disagree with you more.
But I didn't defend the terms. I'm just saying the principle is right. I don't think anybody should be abused or insulted. But
do you not find that insulting, though, to actually put that in an email? To actually even think
We're not talking about... the wider point is there needs to be some change.
And it's okay to say that about white men,
I didn't say that, did I?
No, I'm asking you.
No, it's not. I've never used an abusive term for anybody white, black or brown.
Good. Well, I don't know why the colour of their skin has even come into
Well, I'm sorry. If you were brown, colour of the skin comes into it all the time.
Well, I'm sorry, but
it does, like it or not.
Well, to actually write an email like that, I think...
Yeah, but is that what we're talking about? Are we talking about the rudeness of the email or the principle?
Okay,
how would you feel?
Susan, go on.
How would you feel if you were a white male?
I would feel absolutely threatened by the fact that the world is changing, because the world has been mined for such a long time.
It is absolutely correct that we try and get more people from different backgrounds in different jobs, 100%. It's also correct that we try and make sure that we have a representation of women, 100%. But that should not be on the back of putting such things out.
You're right. I'm not defending the email at all. I'm defending the principle and the change.
Hear you. Siân Berry, what do you make of this email?
I mean, there is obviously a stereotype out there that is based on some reality that a RAF pilot is a upright white man, and that does need to change. Any institution where you've got a preponderance of one group becomes dangerously insular, can create a culture like we've seen in the police, like we've seen in the fire brigade in London, which is not inclusive and can lead to bullying, can lead to cliquiness, all kinds of problems within institutions like that. So seeking to diversify is a really, really good thing.
Shouldn't it be based on whether the individual concerned can actually do the job? I mean, look, I was in the RAF cadets at school. I didn't get further than flying a chipmunk.
Yeah, in every case, we want all our pilots to meet certain standards.
Yeah.
But that does not mean that an institution where apparently the best person for the job is always a certain kind of person is not an institution that has problems. Yeah. And diversity brings benefits of its own. We know that from rules in Europe that bring more women into the boardroom. The benefits there have been in, I think it's been properly quantified in the Welsh government, where the proportional system means there was for a while equal numbers of men and women in that institution, and a much wider range of topics were discussed on a much wider range of terms. There was innovation going on in that parliament because of the diversity that was there, and it's important that we do things in the fiercest way possible, the fiercest language possible. We can debate that, but certainly people need to be clear. This is what we want to change, because this isn't good enough.
Lucy Fisher.
Well, look, I don't think anyone would want to be either admitted to the Air Force or promoted on the basis of their skin colour or their sex. To me, I think you want, as far as possible, for it to remain a meritocracy, people being promoted on the basis of their capabilities. But what I do think is really important with the RAF or any organisation that traditionally has only recruited from one sector of society, that initiatives are started and pursued in earnest to make sure that that a diverse range of the population is being advertised to, that communications campaigns are reaching communities that maybe have been overlooked in the past or don't have representatives who become symbols that younger people look up to.
Lucy, you were formerly defence editor of The Times, and obviously there was a big drive to try and get more female participation in the armed forces. Would you have a view on that and how that worked or where it got to?
Yeah, look, I think it's been in large part a real success, but that happened over some time. There were some sort of painful aspects to the way that was introduced, but by and large I would really applaud the way that the British Army has pursued that without lowering standards, because again it comes back to some of the women, and the MOD has put on days down on Salisbury Plain where, as a reporter, I was invited down to meet some of their incredibly formidable female warriors. They don't want to be looked down on or bullied or derided as tokenistic promotions. So in some cases, I think there has been appropriate acknowledgements and adjustments to criteria made to acknowledge the differences in female biology, but without undermining the ability of all male regiments to fight, or if they're introducing women, that isn't damaging the fighting power of the army, which of course is at the core of what it's there to do.
Well, thank you very much. Brian, that was a great question. Thank you very much for getting us underway. Matt in Brighton sent in a text saying, do the panel believe that the Just Stop Oil protests are justified? And if not, is their answer because they do not believe we are in a climate crisis, which is believed by some to be apocalyptic, or rather that there is no justification for protests of this sort? We've just been discussing that in the last hour. Siân?
Well, the right to protest.
It's appropriate I come to you first on this one.
The right to protest and the protests that are going on at the moment from Just Stop Oil they're adapting constantly to the changing legislation, which is trying to stamp out, as far as I can tell, protest of any kind.
But we hear this. Is it
that
really?
Would achieve change. They want us to just do things in the most polite way that they can safely ignore. And that is not how protest works. That is not how campaigning for change generally works. You do need to have people raising issues in ways that are disruptive in order to get the attention of people who would like to ignore facts like we are in a climate crisis, we are doing nothing like enough to avert what would be an existential problem for the entire world. Now, there are people on the streets are feeling that very, very strongly. They're feeling that because they may work in those areas. They may feel it because they are doctors, they are scientists, they have children who are going to grow up in a world that may not support human life in future. These are really serious issues, and the fact that these people are out on the streets shouldn't make people angry. It should make people sit up and ask why there are people who feel like that.
What about the people who want to just go to work?
Yeah.
Well, there are lots of things that will get in the way of your getting to work. The sheer weight of traffic cause far more delays to people getting to work than anything that just
Susan,
do you
buy that?
right now.
No, I don't. I'm sorry. I really don't. Everybody has got a right to protest. I completely agree with that. But everybody doesn't have a right to ruin other people's lives and to cause the mayhem on the streets that they do. It's the same as Extinction Rebellion. It's all very well if you can agree with what they're standing for, but hard-working Londoners are trying to get to work or to the hospital or to see relatives or whatever else they're doing, and they should have a right to be able to go through the streets to get from A to B without being stopped by these protesters who are causing absolute mayhem, costing us an absolute fortune in policing.
The tactics being used at the moment are very, very far short of mayhem. They are gathering attention for sure, and I absolutely think people have a right to complain about it completely.
But what about the lady?
I don't think the government has a right to change the law to stamp out protesters.
Sean, what about the lady in the Range Rover, famously, who couldn't get her kid to school and then got 20 days community service for nudging a protester? Not that I'm saying that was the right thing to do.
That was an incredibly dangerous action, and I think inappropriate.
Obviously, she was frustrated, and I'm not defending it, but to get her kids to school.
I'm
Lucy.
sorry. No, can I just want to ask.
Go on, yeah, come.
Do you think the suffragettes did a good thing, getting us the vote?
Yes, and this is the argument.
No, can I ask you if you thought that their tactics were out of order?
This is what it constantly comes down to.
Yes, and she's an important question. You can't say we have the right to protest, but then don't protest.
No,
Do you know, if I was younger, I would be gluing myself onto the street because it's that important. Always to say you have the right to strike, you have the right to protest, but don't dare do it.
No.
What kind of a right is that?
But don't wreck other people's lives. If people want to get on with their lives and they want to get to
everything
and want to get
until
on,
they got the vote.
But Yasmin, the suffragettes also committed illegal acts and terrorist acts. Would you endorse that?
Yes, I endorse everything that was done because we got the vote.
Including letter bombing politicians.
We got the vote. It was not an easy or clean fight. We got the vote. The 4 women here got the vote.
Lucy.
I've actually written a biography.
I know you have. Emily Wilding-Davis. I gave it a plug before you even came in.
Fantastic. Glad to hear that, Ali. I do think there's a slight difference between the age then where the difficulty of gaining attention for the cause and the ease with which now people can disseminate information about climate change is slightly different. But for me, when we step back a bit and look at what Just Stop Oil's actions are, even if they were enacted tomorrow and the British government did stop all further licences for oil and gas, this is a global problem. But actually, I'm quite optimistic because, to my mind, the only thing that's going to really solve the problem we have with fossil fuels is when a cleaner, cheaper form of energy is created that is taken up by the main polluters in the world, who are the coal users of China and India and some other nations. And in actual fact, the UK is at the forefront. British scientists of new technologies like nuclear fusion made a huge leap forward last year. There's other options on the table like green hydrogen. I just think the horizon on which Just Stop Oil are looking is too narrow and isn't going to solve the problem.
Yeah, they are making a really simple demand, and the thing is, the government is looking around the country for new licences it can issue in the North Sea for exploration for new fossil fuels, and that is the opposite.
But let me ask you this question, because you're obviously a leading member of the Green Party. You've been the leader as well of the Green Party. How do you solve the issue of baseload power? That the fact is that the sun doesn't shine all the time, the wind doesn't blow. You need to have baseload power. Either you need to solve the issue of battery storage or nuclear. You need to have some baseload power. So you're either going to import it And this is all virtue signalling, isn't it?
Well, I mean, storage is the main thing that we absolutely need to solve. We are opening new factories for batteries. We are looking at new ways to do storage within the UK. Like you say, we've got the ability to come up with the right answers.
But we're not there yet.
For a diverse and stable and reliable grid that will actually serve all our needs. And don't forget, we also need to be cutting the amount of electricity and gas that we use. We are so far behind every single country that I can think of on insulating our homes. And so groups like Insulate Britain are making similar simple demands that will take us a long way along the way to deal with some of these practical issues.
Some people would argue we're not there yet, but that's a topic I think that's going to keep running and running. It's not going anywhere. So you can see we've got a sparky panel here this evening. I knew that it would be an interesting discussion. You can hear that already. If you want to get your question or text into our panel, call 0345 6060 973, text 84850. You're listening to Cross Question on LBC. It's 8:18.
This is LBC. Cross Question on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
It's 8:21 on LBC. You're listening to Cross Question. I'm joined by my panel this evening, Susan Hall, the Conservative London Assembly member, Yasmin Alibhai-Brown, the author and commentator, Lucy Fisher, Whitehall editor of the Financial Times, and Siân Berry of the Green Party. For our next question, we go to Craig in Glasgow. Good evening, Craig. What's your question?
Good evening, Ali. My question for the panel this evening is, are the government and the Prime Minister taking the COVID inquiry seriously anymore, or have they already decided to acquit Boris behind closed doors?
Now, a spokesman for Boris Johnson says he's now passed all of his messages unredacted to the Cabinet Office and has called on the government to now pass those messages on to the COVID inquiry. The government has been given an updated deadline of tomorrow afternoon to forward those messages by the inquiry's chair, Baroness Hallett. Lucy Fisher.
Well, look, for me, this is really wrangling that is more about how government is in part run by WhatsApp these days. And I think there is this blurring of the line between the way in which ministers and advisors communicate with each other about official business, government business, and how the same people use the same devices and the same social media app to communicate with their spouses, their kids about personal matters. Right. So just to be clear what the government is saying, it's saying it wants to redact information that is of a purely personal nature and avoid handing over things it claims are unambiguously irrelevant to the inquiry. But of course, I think it's a very obvious principle of justice that it shouldn't be for those taking the witness stand whose activities are being investigated to be able to self-select what should and shouldn't be redacted. So, bearing in mind that we have to remember at the centre of this inquiry are the bereaved families, people who lost loved ones in the pandemic, and how important it is that the inquiry retains the trust of the public and is seen to be transparent and have full access to materials about decision making in the pandemic. I do think there is, huge pressure on the government to bow to the Chair Baroness Hallett's demand for it to hand over all information unredacted.
Susan, that's a fair point, isn't it? It should be unredacted. It should be up to the committee chair, the COVID inquiry chair, to decide what's relevant and not relevant.
Yeah, it's a difficult one because I summoned some documents recently for the Police and Crime Committee, and it was
sounds fascinating.
No, it was all around something that Sadiq had done that was very bad, as usual. But there were lots of junior officials mentioned in it, and that was redacted so that their names didn't go into it, and that was considered right and proper that it would do. But I will say that it's absolutely important that there is transparency. I do agree with that, but sometimes you do protect junior members of staff and or if there are family members. So it's a difficult one. I appreciate that.
Yasmin, what do you make of this?
I don't buy a word of that, actually.
I think it's a cover-up?
No, I do think that it's not about Boris anymore, I think. It is about, there's some things that they don't want to hand over, whatever it is. And I don't believe for a minute it's the love letter they wrote to their girlfriends or wives or whatever. It isn't that, because they're not on the same WhatsApp groups anyway. The lovers probably have different WhatsApp facilities. So I think this Baroness is not going to let them get away with it. And if it's true that they will take this to court, then there will be no trust in this inquiry. None at all.
Well, how long will it take to go through? I mean, you're thinking about the amount of WhatsApp messages and documents that have to be gone through. We're hearing it could take up to 7 years for this inquiry. By that stage, will it make any difference at all? We might have another pandemic by then.
I don't think so. I think these are just things they're putting out. This judge is a very kind of smart, authoritative, and a sensible woman. And if she says she wants the whole lot, give it to her, and then she will deal with it appropriately.
Well, it looks like it's been handed over now. Sian?
Yeah, I mean, I am pleased that the inquiry are asking for absolutely everything here, because after all, I mean, this was an extraordinary period of history, a period of history that has really hurt a lot of people. A lot of people are feeling totally betrayed by the way that apparently members of the government were disregarding laws that they were sticking to the letter in ways that were incredibly painful to them. All of this does have to come out, as well as some of the other issues around the way that government became incredibly casual and to do with, I'm trying not to libel anybody, but to do with, who and millions and millions of pounds of
Sian,
public money went out in a way that was incredibly casual over WhatsApp. And those things do need to be released.
Sian, it was a very acute situation. The government would say that they had to act very quickly, and yes, mistakes of course were made, but they had to act very rapidly.
And they should expect to be honest about what happened, and to some extent I think the public will give them leeway for having to act in a quick way, but not in a way that's corrupt, not in a way that betrays what everybody else was trying to do to save lives.
I lost my sister to COVID, and I could not see her or go to her funeral. All right? I cannot forgive this lot for what
a lot of people will feel the same. Lucy?
All I was going to add is, I've been reporting on this, so I have also spoken to a number of ministers who served during the pandemic era, who themselves are frustrated at the government's position because they say they would be happy to hand over all their own communications, and some have urged the government to take a nothing to hide, nothing to fear approach. So I think we've also got to acknowledge that there are many in government who say, look, it was an unprecedented situation, but by and large we did act in good faith, we did the best, and tried to get things right. So it's not everyone within government that wants this redacted approach to continue, although of course some...
They want to be open about it. They want to get it out
want
there.
to be open.
Craig in Glasgow, just to come back to you briefly on this, you've heard what the panel think about it. What are your views?
Yeah, listen, I just think that it's all ridiculous. I think the government are very much in a situation where it's kind of like, well, we'll cooperate with this, but begrudgingly, because I would not, if I was under investigation by the police, for talking sake, for anything, I, as the person under investigation, wouldn't have the privilege to decide what information they do and do not get, because I don't think it's relevant or not. And it feels like even if, it's not overtly that, the optics of it look like it's just more cover-up. And I think Sunak clearly has a vested interest, because although he might say he's fresh and new, he was Boris's number 2 in command, basically, as Chancellor when this was going on. So he clearly could be damaged by this as well. And I honestly think that it's not good enough, the behaviour from the government, and you can't palm it off as something that doesn't matter, because it does. People lost loved ones, people couldn't be there for them, so it does matter.
Indeed. No, I think it's a fair point, Craig, and I think also Rishi Sunak, as you say, is under some pressure, because he did come in and say that he would clean up government. He was coming on the back of all these the ongoing inquiries and investigations into Partygate, which still seem to be rumbling on. We'll hear from the Privileges Committee very soon. So you're listening to Cross Question on LBC. I'm joined by my stellar panel here. If you want to get a question into them, then call 0345 6060 text 84850. We'll be back just after the news in a second with Serena Farrow.
The ex-Prime Minister says he's given the Cabinet Office all of the material requested by the COVID inquiry, including WhatsApp messages and notebooks. Boris Johnson says it's had access to the material for several months now and is urging the department to hand it to the inquiry, which wants it tomorrow. The childcare industry has warned it won't be able to cope with the government's latest measure to offer more support to families. From the end of next month, those on universal credit will be given almost 50% more funding. Ministers say it'll help people get back into work, but the sector says it doesn't address issues around staffing and vacancies. And British officials have been described as a legitimate military target by a former Russian president. Dmitry Medvedev has criticised the UK's support of Ukraine following a drone attack on Moscow yesterday morning. LBC weather: cloudy in the east and far north tonight, spreading westwards, staying pretty clear elsewhere, though breezy in the south, with a low of 5 degrees.
This is LBC. Cross Question on LBC. Text 84850.
You're listening to Cross Question on LBC. It's just gone 8:34. I'm joined by my stellar panel, Yasmin Alibhai-Brown, the author and political commentator. It's really nice to see you, Yasmin. I've been a huge fan for a long time.
Susan, you say that to all the girls.
You know it's true. Susan Hall, Conservative London Assembly member, who's also... Susan, you're going for Mayor of London? You're going to be...
I am indeed.
When does the process end? When do you know if you're going to win or not?
Well, we go down to 3 on the 11th of the month, and then whoever is chosen will know on the 19th. I'm always confident. You know that, Ali. I'd make such a good mayor.
Excellent. Indeed. I'm sure that the selectorate will come to the same conclusion. Siân, are you going to stand for Parliament again or not?
Well, I've stood for mayor 3 times, so good luck, Susan. It's one of the best things to do, standing for Mayor of London, because you get to challenge the main parties on a really big platform as a Green. And London is such an amazing city and a region in its own right. We have so many good powers where we can do really innovative things. You can come up with some really good ideas and put them across during that campaign.
And you're not standing for Parliament next time? You're not sure?
No, I'm standing for the Assembly again next year.
Fine. You're happy
and hoping to continue to challenge whoever is mayor, whether that's a Green or not.
Excellent. And Lucy, your latest book is out as well, on women in war.
Yes, very kind of you to
The last heroines of Britain's greatest generation. Sounds fascinating. I'll get around to reading that very, very soon. So, let's get on to our next question. Mark in Kilburn says, recent polls are showing more and more people believe Brexit was a mistake. Despite what Keir Starmer has been saying recently, do the panel believe that whoever wins the next election, the UK will inevitably need to join the European single market and customs union to allow growth to increase? And this is on the back of Keir Starmer, who's written a piece today for the Daily Express in which he said the nation's key economic problems can all be fixed outside the EU, inverted commas, and that's why we should be optimistic about post-Brexit Britain. Lucy.
No, look, I think that there is still a sense that all the major political parties are still smarting from the divisions of the original Brexit wars, and I don't think it's going to be really a key issue heading into the next general election. If anything, possibly the election after that, 2029 odd, could be a moment where, depending on the circumstances, people could talk about things like single market or customs union membership. I think Labour's been pretty clear in ruling that out. There's no appetite among Conservatives. Even the Lib Dems, have really, stepped away from cleaving to sort of pro-EU policies because they saw there was no kind of electoral benefit in doing so. So for me, I think this is a settled issue for the moment. Keir Starmer has spoken about reappraising the Brexit deal. We knew there was a renegotiation coming up in 2026. So that's not him threatening or pledging, depending on which way you see it, to do anything that wasn't already going to happen. But I think he's also been pretty clear this doesn't involve single market or customs union membership.
Siân, is it settled? Because the Greens were very, very open about wanting to remain.
Yes.
Do you think it's back on the table?
We're the party that's been absolutely consistent all the way through this. And I think you said at the beginning there, the majority of people think that Brexit was a mistake. And the economy agrees with you. We're one of the only countries not to return to pre-pandemic levels of trade. The customs union is causing, the lack of being in the customs union is causing an immense drag on our economy. The lack of Europeans coming to work is causing immense trouble for our public services. People can see that and they agree. And the Greens have a pragmatic policy of rejoining the customs union, looking to align everything that we can on social and environmental policies so that we can in line with the EU on those, and to do more to reintroduce freedom of movement.
So the only party that's actually being open...
And we want to talk about rejoining at the right time. Yeah.
Right, so the only party doing it... So it was all a mistake, Susan?
No, and I do agree with Lucy. I mean, I knock on doors all the time. I don't get this anymore at all. The only people you get this for is devout Remainers. And they will just constantly bring it up. We're moving on. People are talking about the cost of living far more now. That is what is affecting people. And we've left, and hopefully we will remain having left.
Susan, in London is a very voted Remain as a city. Yep. Are you telling me that your chums on the streets of Harrow, where you were a councillor, really don't care about Brexit? I mean, is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's not, if you knock on the doors, they do not mention Brexit.
Cost of living.
It is the cost of living. Anybody that knocks on doors, it's also my bin hasn't been collected.
Indeed,
I mean,
well.
down to that level. But no, it's not discussed anymore.
Right.
We've moved on, and we must move on, because it was so damaging to so many of us. So many families fell out over Brexit. It was damaging altogether, with people so polarised on...
Do you think we've got the Brexit dividend yet?
It will come.
It will come. It will come. Yasmin doesn't look convinced. Yasmin.
I'll be dead by then, and I don't want to be dead. And these three, certainly, I haven't followed the Lib Dem position, but certainly the two main parties are now completely dissociated from the views of the population, which is absolutely survey after survey. So I really disagree with you, Lucy, that this is done and dusted and we're never going to have to deal with this. People are now So, talking about knocking on doors, I'm not a politician. I knocked on 2 doors near where I live in Ealing to talk to them about Brexit. And I was very open. I said, I was a Remainer. I don't know how you voted. What do you think now? And they wanted to talk, and they were talking. And many of them were saying, I made a mistake. You can't ignore that whole swell and just carry on as Keir Starmer's doing and Rishi Sunak is doing. You can't do that in a democracy.
I'd really like to see the response to the things that Keir Starmer has been saying today amongst Labour voters. It's all very well telling your party to shut up about it because you don't want it to be talked about. But Labour voters on the doorstep must be bringing that up with people that knock on doors. And I think if they're doing their focus groups like they do, I'd be really interested to be a fly on the wall there to see what happens.
Yeah, well, that's my point. I'm not taking a view on whether the country at large thinks that, but I'm saying that I think within the main parties there is a view that for Labour in particular, it's a real wedge issue. And when it comes to immigration, part of the core arguments of Brexit, I think it's painful for Labour. There is such a chasm between a schism between different views on different wings of the party that
I don't think they can shut down debate, those parties.
Lucy, is that because they're trying to win back the Red Wall and they know that if they push this issue very hard, they will scare off the voters who left them last time?
Yeah, in short, I think that's pretty much the nail on the head.
Yeah. Can I just say that the thought of Yasmin Alibhai-Brown knocking on my door to canvass my opinion on Brexit, I would be delighted if you knocked on my door, Yasmin. Excellent. Let's go to our next question from Ben in Clacton. Good evening, Ben.
Good evening, Ali. Good evening, panel. The question is, was James Cleverly wise to say that Ukraine had within their rights to send drones outside of their own territory?
Now, let me just give you a bit of context here. The Foreign Secretary was in Estonia earlier this week and said that Ukraine has the right to project force beyond its borders to undermine Russia's ability to project force into Ukraine itself. This followed a drone strike on Moscow, an attack which Ukraine has flatly denied being directly involved with. Susan.
I imagine James would have taken advice before he actually said that anyway. I do have sympathy with what he said. If you look at the aggression from Russia, it has been quite dreadful. Just how long do the Ukrainians have to sit there, like sitting ducks, waiting? Mind you, they have said that they weren't responsible for those drones in any event. So, if they're not, they said they were pleased about it. Well, of course, they would be pleased if anything was inflicted upon the Russians because of what's happening to them. But, I mean, they said that they didn't have anything to do with it. And so I think he was just passing a comment.
Lucy, former defence editor, do you think we're in a proxy war now with Russia?
Well, look, I think there's just a little bit more context that's really important to point out with James Cleverly's comments. Actually, Susan, I don't think he was prepped for this. Watching the press conference, I think he was slightly caught on the back foot. So he was answering a question that was asked about the drone strike on this Moscow residential neighbourhood. And in fact, he made clear he couldn't comment on that. But he said the general principle was that Ukraine did have the right to project force beyond its own borders on the grounds of self-defence targeting military installations. So I think that's a really key point. He was saying that, he backed Ukraine to use its own weapons to attack, as it has done. We know it's, attacked kind of Russian weapons depots just over the border into Ukraine. So it is slightly more specific what he's saying, and it is very different from endorsing what would be a war crime, which is an attack on civilians.
But Lucy, let me ask you this, because obviously throughout this process we have supported Ukraine, quite rightly, but it's been a creeping commitment. So firstly, we were agonising about tanks, then we're agonising about planes. The US has now signed off that allies can give planes. Now, if a plane were to be in a situation where there was a direct attack on Russia, what kind of situation would we then be in?
Well, let's see where we get to that. I mean, so far, there has been a very clear delineation between what Ukraine does with weapons donated by the West, which are only for use within its own borders. Yep. And frankly, I think that I don't think it's likely that they would betray that promise because, frankly, if the West withdrew its support, Ukraine would lose the war immediately. Yeah. And what it does with its own weapons, which is a little bit more of a fuzzy line. So let's see when these jets, if they are delivered, how the terms that bind them.
Yeah. Yasmin.
I just don't think he's very clever. And he's got a job he's not clever enough to
James
do.
Cleverly is not clever enough.
Yeah. And
you heard it here first. What makes you say that?
Well, because he's a Tory.
No. There are some very clever Tories. There are very clever Tories.
Go on, Yasmin.
Rishi Sunak is a clever Tory. James Cleverly is not.
Because?
Because he's just not got any depth. And I think this is a job that at the moment, in the way the world is, we are really in such a fragile state around the world with, wars happening here, there and everywhere. It really needs somebody who can think in a much deeper and complicated way than Mr. Cleverly can.
But what's your evidence for the fact that
because I've heard him and watched him and witnessed him throughout his miserable little career. And actually, this is a dangerous thing. We need somebody better to be the foreign secretary.
But better in what sense? Because the government line...
Like I said, somebody who can...
But the government line is, Yasmin, that they are supporting...
They're running out of good people. That's the problem, isn't it? They really need somebody very, very sophisticated, deep thinking, and able to put the pieces together. I'm sorry, I do not think Mr. Cleverly does that.
Well, the government line is a government line, Sean, isn't it?
I mean, it is an incredible... I mean, you're right, Yasmin, it's an incredibly delicate diplomatic situation. So every single word that our diplomats and cabinet members say is interpreted in a very, precise and forensic way. And it is incredibly important that people are careful. We are backing Ukraine in an important defensive war in a way that's very carefully set out. And so to accidentally go beyond that is incredibly dangerous. But I mean, thank goodness it's not Boris Johnson in the Foreign Secretary's seat right now.
Yes, I do think he's better than Boris Johnson.
He was chaotic in the extreme, by all accounts.
Well, for some people that's not particularly hard, but not to be controversial. We've got Susan here as well. It may take a different view.
Absolutely.
Interesting discussion on that particular one. You're listening to Cross Question. Get your questions in. You've still got time. 0345 60 60973. Text 84850. You're listening to Cross Question on LBC. It's 8:47.
This is LBC.
The Elizabeth
Britain's conversation. Cross Question. Tweet at LBC.
You're listening to Cross Question on LBC. It's 8:50. I'm joined by Yasmin Alibhai-Brown, Susan Hall, Siân Berry and Lucy Fisher. The next question is from Alex in Enfield. It's a text question. What would the panel do about the ULEZ extension, considering it's set to negatively affect some of the poorest in London? A bit of context here. London's ultra-low emission zone is set to expand to include the whole of the capital at the end of August. Before it can go ahead, the expansion will face judicial review launched by 5 Conservative-led local councils, 4 London boroughs, Bexley, Bromley, Harrow, Hillingdon, and also Surrey County Council. I've got to come to you, Susan, on this first.
Yes, I would stop it straight away.
Because
it's just nothing but a tax on hard-working Londoners who cannot afford to replace their vehicles. The venom against this in outer London, I've never known anything like it. And it's because people are absolutely desperate. They cannot afford to do this.
And how much is it going to cost them?
Well, in some cases, they just can't afford to replace their car. How much is another car?
Because there's £12.50 a day.
£12.50
plus the car itself. You've got to...
Yes, that's right. And they just can't afford to do it. I spoke to 2 pensioners the other day. They'd got cars that they'd had that they were hoping to, quote, to see them out. They couldn't afford to replace them. They don't know what they're going to do. And that was in Enfield. I went to a ULEZ rally in Enfield. This is all very well in inner London when you can just walk and get a bus or a train from literally no distance. In outer London, it is quite different.
Do you think it's going to cost him the election, Sadiq Khan?
Well,
Do you think this could be the issue?
The venom out there from Labour voters, absolutely. It's a real thing. I would stop it on day one of being the mayor. There's no question about that. But the trouble is, if he puts it in August, the damage will be done. And it's not just that, though, Ali. It's also so many tradespeople that vans don't comply. They live slightly outside London. They're going to go and do their work outside London. They're not going to come into us. Plumbers, builders, etc.
Well, Siân Berry from the Green Party has really been containing herself very well.
She agrees with me. You know you
Susan,
agree with me.
No. The Assembly voted to expand the scrappage scheme that goes alongside the ULEZ. But honestly, you and the Conservatives cannot be trusted with London's health and our efforts to deal with climate change.
Siân, just for the listeners, how much do they get for scrappage? Do you know?
There's a grant of some thousands of pounds. Right. It's more for people who are disabled and small businesses can claim as well. But the overall funding for the scheme isn't enough to cover the number of people who might need it. But we need this policy. It's important to get policies like this right, but it's important to get these policies in place. I'd have introduced a London-wide ultra-low emission zone from the start. I wouldn't have gone halfway and then all the way to the edge gradually. I'd have done it from the start, and I'd have done it alongside a proper scrappage scheme and alongside better public transport.
Siân, we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis at the moment. So how can people afford to change their cars right now?
You have to have the help for people on low incomes, and you have to have improvements in public transport. I've done research. I've asked people in outer London, do you feel forced to own a car? And a quarter of them say yes, those people need help. And I'm writing to those people at the moment, asking them to tell me which of their journeys make them feel like that. And I want to get a picture of the kinds of new public transport we need for outer London. There's no reason why outer London public transport shouldn't be as good as for inner London.
But it's also not just a London issue. It's also in Glasgow now. They're introducing a low emission zone. It comes into force at midnight tonight. All vehicles entering the city have to meet certain standards on air pollution. Makes sense, doesn't it?
Well, yes,
Yasmin?
because we know the research. I mean, I live on a main road. And I've lived in the same flat since 1978, never moved. And when we bought it, it wasn't a road with a lot of traffic. It now is part of the South-North Circular. And I had no idea until I saw the research, and very relatively recently, that the reason my children and I suffer from asthma, which I wasn't born with, I didn't grow up with, was the result of living where we do. And now we've kind of got new windows and so on, the house is less polluted. We didn't know this would be the effect.
It's a difficult one. Lucy?
Yeah, look, I think the evidence is that it's damaging from people's health, particularly on young lungs, but I also am sympathetic with people who rely on cars, trucks for personal travel, work, their businesses. And I think, the ideal would be to have a support scheme, an expansion of the scrappage scheme that would allow people to retrofit or upgrade their vehicles to meet the criteria that are coming in.
I want to fit. Yes, I think it's also the government's responsibility to provide for a scrappage scheme that supports people who live outside of London, and that is one of the demands of the legal challenge that you're making. And I think that one ought to be
pressure at the moment.
That should be a judgment against the government.
Should not go in.
I just want to squeeze, if I can, a couple more questions in. This one here is a text question from Chrissy in Leeds, who says, Al Pacino, the actor, is going to become a dad again. He's 83 years old. Is this morally outrageous, or are you relaxed about it? And just to give a context here, his 29-year-old girlfriend, Noor Al-Fallah, is currently 8 months pregnant. He's already got 3 kids, aged between in their mid-30s and early 20s, I think. Another Italian-American movie legend, Robert De Niro, looks like the Godfather cast here. This is all the rage. Recently became a father for the 7th time at the age of 79. And Formula One boss Bernie Ecclestone also is in the same bracket as well. Lucy, what do you make of this?
Well, look, it's not illegal, but does it make me feel a bit queasy? Yes, frankly. And if you look at, frankly, can they perform a role of parenthood into the foreseeable future for that child to become an adult? It's unlikely. So I find it a little bit odd, such huge age gaps, and when the father is quite so old that they're possibly unable to see their own children grow up.
Sean?
Yeah, that's a really good point, but it's their private life. It's up to them. I've no comment to make.
We agree with each other. I knew at some point that would happen. Yes, live and let live, I say. That's what they want to do.
Imagine if it was a woman. If a woman of 60 gets pregnant, in whatever way, and sometimes once in a while a story breaks, there's outrage. Okay? I just think, it's almost like it should have been a plot in Succession, could it? Logan Roy's latest squeeze could have been pregnant, and then imagine the ending.
Indeed. Let me try and fit one more one in, which is from Steph in Trafford. This is meant to be a fun question. Scientists in Norwich are developing peas which don't taste like peas. Which other popular food would you like to change the taste of? The more controversial, the better. Susan?
Celery. I'd make it taste like chocolate, and I could eat loads of it and put on no weight whatsoever.
Very good. Yasmin?
Baked beans.
Baked beans, why?
I can't bear the taste or the texture or anything of it. So if it
What would you make them taste like?
Something more nutty and crunchy.
Sean, what would you do?
I agree with Susan. I don't like raw celery at all. But yeah, also the fake chicken that you get that's vegan. Yes. This is the reason why they're developing vegan? These peas. Yeah. I try and eat as much alternatives to meat as possible. Yeah. And some of them are great. I think the alternatives to chicken that you can find are like, why would you kill a chicken when you can have that? But the alternatives to bacon are really poor, and I don't eat bacon anymore, and I can't eat that either because it's terrible. So I would make those taste better, I think.
Okay, I do have veggie sausages a lot actually. They're pretty good.
They're different.
They're different styles, and they're pretty good actually. Yeah. Lucy.
Well, mine would be on the lines of veggie food as well. I've not eaten meat for about 20 odd years, and I used to love the old-fashioned veggie burger that was just a bean burger.
Yes.
And so what I want to see unengineered is these new meat-like textures, which to me are just too much like the original, and I'd like it to go back to the old-fashioned.
That is actually a very good point, because everything is now engineered to taste like meat, which seems a bit odd if you're a vegetarian. Yeah. Why would you want to taste something that tastes like meat? It does seem a bit odd. What a fantastic panel we've had. I knew it would be interesting and lively, and it certainly has been. And very warm thanks to Yasmin, Susan, Sean and Lucy. Great panel. Thanks a lot for all your input, and thanks also for all your texts and questions as well. Now, coming up after the news, something very interesting, which is that the head of the National Trust has opened the door to the restitution of its colonial artefacts, raising the prospect of Clive of India's treasures being returned. Now, Rene Oliveri said the organisation, he's the interim chairman, said the organisation is preparing a policy which will look at the provenance of items in its collection, balancing that against the public benefit of keeping them in the UK. The Trust has got a collection that includes 1,000 items brought back from South and East Asia. A lot of them are sitting in Powys Castle in Wales. I found this absolutely fascinating, and the question I've got for you is this. Should the UK return its stolen colonial artefacts to their country of origin?
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, Boris Johnson says he's given the Cabinet Office all of the material requested by the COVID inquiry, including WhatsApp messages and notebooks. The ex-Prime Minister says it's had access to the material for several months now and is urging the department to hand it to the inquiry, which wants it tomorrow. The childcare industry says it won't be able to cope with the government's latest plans to get people back into work. From the end of next month, families on universal credit will be able to claim almost 50% more support. But the sector says it doesn't have the spaces for increased demand and there are wider issues that need solving. Early years and childcare lead at the Women's Budget Group, Sarah Ronan, has told LBC she has concerns.
By our calculations, the government would need to recruit an additional 38,000 staff into the early years sector by 2025 if it's going to deliver on this. It feels a little bit unrealistic, and the reason it feels unrealistic is because we have an acute recruitment and retention crisis in the early years sector at the moment. So turnover in the sector is double what it is in the rest of the labour market.
There's a warning that Europe's biggest nuclear power station in Russian-held eastern Ukraine is a catastrophe waiting to happen. 2 workers at